I came home from base expecting my daughter to run into my arms. Instead, I found her asleep on the concrete floor of our freezing garage, bruises darkening both arms. For 1 second, I couldn't move. The garage door was cracked open just enough to let in a ribbon of gray Kentucky light. Lily was curled beneath an old moving blanket beside Daniel's workbench, still wearing the pink pajamas with little silver stars I'd bought her at Target. One sock was missing. Her cheek rested against a folded army sweatshirt of mine. Lily. Her eyes opened fast, too fast. She pushed herself backward before she recognized me. Mom. Then she scrambled up and wrapped both arms around my waist. I dropped my duffel bag and held her. She was cold all the way through her sweater. Her hair smelled like dust and motor oil. What happened, baby? She pressed her face into my uniform and said nothing. I had driven home from Fort Campbell a day earlier than planned. My Thanksgiving leave officially started Wednesday morning, but my commander let me leave Tuesday afternoon after we finished inventory. I'd stopped at Kroger for a pumpkin pie and a bag of those cinnamon pecans Lily loved. I pictured Daniel pretending to be surprised, his mother fussing over the turkey, Lily shouting from the front porch. Instead, the driveway was empty. Daniel's black Ram was gone. So was his mother's Cadillac. The house was dark and somebody had left the mudroom door unlocked. I knelt and looked at Lily's arms. The bruises were shaped like fingers. Who did this? She pulled her sleeves down. Daddy got mad. My mouth went dry. Why? I spilled juice on Grandma's white rug. I wanted to call Daniel right then. I wanted to hear him answer so I could unload every word burning through me. My phone was already in my hand when Lily grabbed my wrist. Don't tell him, I told. That stopped me. There are moments when every instinct in you screams to act, but training tells you to slow down. Look, listen, preserve what matters. I took pictures of the bruises with the date visible on my phone screen. Then I carried her inside, locked every door, and turned up the heat. The kitchen looked staged. No dirty dishes, no food left out, just a yellow legal pad on the counter beneath Daniel's coffee mug. His handwriting was large and careless. We took everyone to Aspen. She was never family. Deal with her. I read it twice. Lily stood behind me, clutching the moving blanket around her shoulders. They said I couldn't go because Grandma said I wasn't real family. I folded the note and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Then Lily reached into the blanket and held out a crumpled manila envelope. Mom, she whispered, Grandma dropped this. I opened it expecting travel papers. Instead, I saw my name on a mortgage document I had never signed. And beneath it was a sticky note that said, "Destroy after Thanksgiving." I looked at my daughter, then back at the papers. For the first time since I walked into that garage, I smiled. Not because anything was funny, because Daniel had finally made a mistake I could prove. I stood in my own kitchen holding papers that shouldn't have existed. The first page was a mortgage refinance application. My name was on it. So was a signature that looked enough like mine to fool someone who didn't know me. The problem was I had never signed it. I flipped to the next page. Another signature. Another document. Then another. Lily tugged gently on my sleeve. Mom? I looked down and forced my face to soften. It's okay, sweetheart. It wasn't okay. Not even close. I set the envelope on the dining table and took a slow breath. 12 years in the Army had taught me one thing above everything else. Panic makes smart people careless. I wasn't going to be careless. Have you eaten today? She shrugged. I had cereal. When? This morning. It was nearly 5 in the afternoon. I opened the refrigerator. A carton of milk, half a bottle of ketchup, a package of sliced cheese, nothing else. The freezer held a single frozen pizza and a bag of ice. That hit me harder than I expected. Daniel knew I was supposed to arrive the next morning. Even if he'd left for Colorado, why leave our 6-year-old with almost no food? Unless... No. I stopped myself before my mind wandered too far ahead of the facts. I warmed the pizza while Lily sat at the kitchen island, coloring quietly with crayons she'd found in a drawer. Every few minutes she'd glance toward the front window, almost like she expected someone to pull into the driveway. You don't have to worry, I said. She nodded. But she kept looking. When dinner was ready, she only ate one slice. Your tummy hurt. A little. Since when? She shrugged again. Couple days. I made a mental note to take her to urgent care first thing in the morning. After she finished eating, I carried the envelope upstairs into our bedroom. Daniel's closet was half empty. 3 suitcases were gone. His passport drawer was open. The jewelry box his mother had given me for our 10th anniversary sat untouched on the dresser. Nothing looked hurried. This had been planned. I searched room by room. Guest bedroom, home office, laundry room. Everything was strangely neat. Too neat. Then I walked into Lily's room. Her favorite stuffed rabbit was missing. Her small pink suitcase was still under the bed. So they hadn't even intended to take her. I sat on the edge of her mattress trying to make sense of it. Daniel wasn't always like this. When we met at a Veterans Day fundraiser in Clarksville, he was funny patient, and the first man who didn't seem intimidated by my career. He packed care packages when I deployed. He sent Lily little video messages while I was overseas. Somewhere along the way, something had changed. Or maybe I simply hadn't wanted to see it. My phone buzzed. Daniel. I stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. A text appeared seconds later. Hope you found the note. Don't ruin Thanksgiving by being dramatic. We'll talk when we get back. I laughed once. Not because it was amusing, because the man actually believed he was still in control. I walked back downstairs and spread the documents across the dining table. Property records, bank statements, mortgage paperwork. Most of it made little sense. Until I reached the last folder. Inside was a photocopy of the deed to our house. A yellow sticky note clung to the corner. 3 words. Destroy after Thanksgiving. My heartbeat slowed. That wasn't something people wrote about family vacation plans. That was something people wrote when they believed no one would discover what they were hiding. Outside, the November wind rattled the maple tree against the front porch. Behind me, Lily padded into the dining room, holding her stuffed bear. Mom. Yes, sweetheart. She pointed toward the envelope. I think Grandma was really scared when she dropped it. I looked back at the papers. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just about a cruel Thanksgiving. Someone had been trying to erase something, and I intended to find out exactly what it was. The next morning, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lily curled up on that cold garage floor. By 7:30, we were sitting in the waiting room at Tenova Healthcare in Clarksville. Thanksgiving decorations hung from the ceiling paper turkeys made by local elementary school kids. Christmas music played softly over the speakers, even though Thanksgiving was still 2 days away. Lily sat beside me hugging her stuffed bear. She hadn't let go of it once. A nurse called her name. Inside the exam room, Dr. Melissa Carter, a pediatrician probably in her early 50s, smiled warmly. Hi there, Lily. Lily gave a tiny wave. The doctor examined her carefully. When she rolled up Lily's sleeves, her expression changed. Emma, she said quietly, can you tell me what happened? I answered honestly. I came home yesterday afternoon and found my daughter sleeping in our garage. The room went silent. Dr. Carter gently measured the bruises with a small ruler before photographing them for Lily's medical record. They're consistent with someone grabbing her forcefully. I already knew that. Hearing someone else say it made my stomach tighten. Dr. Carter pulled her stool closer. I need to ask you something. Go ahead. Do you believe Lily is safe if she returns home today? I looked at my daughter. She was coloring a turkey on a paper activity sheet, humming softly to herself, as if none of this concerned her. No, I didn't think so. She explained that Kentucky law required her to file a report with Child Protective Services whenever she suspected abuse. I want you to know, she added gently, this isn't about blaming you, it's about protecting her. I nodded. I understand. Honestly, I was grateful someone else was finally saying out loud what I'd been trying not to believe. An hour later, we walked back to my SUV. Lily climbed into her booster seat while I buckled her in. Can we get hot chocolate? You bet. Her little smile nearly broke me. We stopped at a Starbucks near Wilma Rudolph Boulevard. I ordered a coffee for myself and a kid's hot chocolate. As we pulled into our neighborhood, I noticed someone standing beside my mailbox. Mrs. Eleanor Jenkins. She'd lived across the street longer than anyone. 71 years old. Retired school librarian. Always trimming her roses. Always waving when Lily rode her bike. She looked nervous. When I got out of the SUV, she walked over before I could say hello. Emma! Her voice trembled. I've been praying you'd come home early. Something in her tone made every nerve in my body tighten. What happened? She glanced toward my house before lowering her voice. I didn't know if I should interfere. You should. She swallowed. Last Friday, I saw Lily sitting on the garage steps after dark. I stared at her. She wasn't inside. Mrs. Jenkins slowly shook her head. It was below 40 degrees. My chest tightened. I brought over some soup, and your mother-in-law answered the door. Mrs. Jenkins looked ashamed. She told me Lily needed to learn consequences. My hands clenched without me realizing it. Mrs. Jenkins continued. I asked if I should call you. What did she say? Her face hardened. She said, Mrs. Jenkins hesitated. Then she repeated the words exactly. That little girl isn't really ours anyway. For a moment I couldn't hear anything except the wind. Mrs. Jenkins reached into her purse. I couldn't just stand there. She handed me her phone. There are pictures. I opened the gallery. The first image showed Lily sitting alone on the garage steps, wrapped in that same old blanket. The timestamp read, November 20th, 7:48 p.m. The second picture was worse. Daniel stood in the doorway, his arms folded, watching, doing nothing. I handed the phone back slowly. I didn't know what else to do, Mrs. Jenkins whispered. You already did more than anyone else. She looked relieved. Then she remembered something. Oh. She reached into another pocket. I almost forgot. She handed me a folded grocery receipt. I found this blowing across your driveway Saturday morning. I unfolded it. It wasn't a grocery receipt. It was a fuel receipt. From Aspen-Pitkin County Airport. Attached to it was the name of a cabin. I recognized the address immediately. It matched one of the property documents from the envelope. And suddenly, the papers Grandma had accidentally dropped no longer looked accidental at all. I waited until Lily was asleep before I spread everything across the dining room table again. Outside, the temperature had dropped into the 30s. The neighborhood was quiet except for an occasional pickup truck rolling past, and somebody 2 streets over testing their Christmas lights. Inside, my house felt strangely unfamiliar. It wasn't because Daniel was gone. It was because I no longer knew how much of our life had been real. I lined up every document in the order I'd found them. The mortgage application, the deed, property tax statements, bank transfers, insurance forms. Most people would have seen a pile of paperwork. Years of Army logistics taught me to see a timeline. Paper always tells a story. You just have to slow down long enough to read it. Around 9 that night, I noticed something odd. Every signature that was supposedly mine had been dated during the same 2-week period. I grabbed my laptop. Fort Campbell keeps detailed deployment records for obvious reasons. After logging into my military account, I pulled up my duty history. There it was. Those exact 2 weeks? I had been at Fort Irwin, California, participating in a National Training Center exercise. 14 straight days. No leave. No trips home. No chance I had signed anything in Kentucky. I leaned back in my chair. So that's your game. I wasn't looking at a misunderstanding anymore. I was looking at forgery. My phone buzzed. It was Rachel Monroe. Rachel and I had known each other almost 18 years. We'd met as captains, survived more field exercises than either of us cared to count, and somehow stayed close despite assignments all over the country. She answered before I could even say hello. I've been thinking about you all day. I wish we were talking under better circumstances. So do I. I explained everything. Finding Lily. The bruises. The note. The envelope. Mrs. Jenkins's photographs. Rachel didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she asked only one question. Do you still have every document exactly the way you found it? Yes. Good. Her voice became all business. Don't write on them. I haven't. Don't staple anything together. I won't. And whatever you do? She paused. Don't confront Daniel. I looked toward the dark front window. That's becoming harder by the minute. I know. No, Rachel, you don't. I probably don't, she sighed. But if these signatures are forged, anger is the one thing that can ruin a clean case. She was right. I hated that she was right. I'll overnight you to a civilian attorney if we need one. I appreciate that. But first, Rachel hesitated, I want you to send me pictures of every page. Within 15 minutes, I'd scanned the entire envelope using my phone. She called back less than an hour later. Something in her voice had changed. Emma. What? I ran the county property records. And the refinancing isn't the strange part. What is... There was another filing. I frowned. What filing? A transfer request. My stomach tightened. Rachel continued. It was prepared 6 weeks ago, but it hasn't been recorded yet. Why not? Because... She stopped. Because it couldn't legally go through until after Thanksgiving. The room suddenly felt colder. I looked again at the sticky note. Destroy after Thanksgiving. It wasn't just a reminder. It was a deadline. Rachel spoke softly. I think they expected you to come home after the holiday, so the paperwork would already be finished. Exactly. I rubbed my forehead. Why wait until after Thanksgiving? I don't know. Then another thought hit me. Unless they needed me out of the way. Rachel was quiet. I was thinking the same thing. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, she said, "Emma, there's one more thing." "What?" "I compared one of those signatures to the deed you signed when you bought the house. And they practiced." "What do you mean?" "The fake signature gets better with every document." I stared at the pages spread across my table. Someone hadn't forged my name once. They had rehearsed it, over and over, until they believed nobody would ever notice. They were wrong, because they had no idea who they were trying to fool. I barely slept that night. Not because I was afraid, because my mind wouldn't stop working. Every piece of paper on my dining room table fit together a little better than it had the day before. The forged signatures, the planned refinance, the timing. It all pointed in one direction. Daniel hadn't made one bad decision. He'd been making them for months. By 6 o'clock Wednesday morning, I was already making coffee when Rachel called again. "I've got something." I sat down immediately. "What did you find?" "I enlarged every photo you texted me. And there was something taped inside the envelope." I frowned. "Taped?" "It barely showed up in one of the pictures." I grabbed the envelope and held it under the kitchen light. At first, I didn't see anything. Then I slipped my finger beneath the inside flap. Something caught. A tiny strip of clear tape. My heartbeat picked up. Carefully, I peeled it away. A black USB flash drive dropped into my hand. For several seconds, I simply stared at it. "Emma!" Rachel's voice came through the speaker. "You still there?" I found it. "What?" "A flash drive." I knew it. I carried my laptop to the dining room and plugged it in. For a moment, nothing happened. Then 3 folders appeared. Bank records. House. Camera backup. I opened the last one first. There were dozens of video files. Each was labeled with a date. The earliest one was almost 4 months old. I clicked it. The picture came into focus. It was our living room, one of the indoor security cameras. I remembered buying that system years earlier after a string of package thefts in the neighborhood. Daniel had insisted we didn't need cloud storage because it cost extra every month. Apparently, someone had changed their mind. The recording showed Daniel sitting on the couch while his mother stood by the fireplace. Neither knew they were being recorded. Daniel sounded irritated. "We can't keep waiting." His mother folded her arms. "Then stop hesitating. What if Emma notices?" "She won't." I felt my jaw tighten. Daniel sighed. "She's careful." His mother laughed. "She's trusting." Then she leaned closer. "Besides, she's always at that base." I looked away from the screen for a second. That one sentence hurt more than I wanted to admit. Not because it was true. Because she'd turned my military service into a weapon against me. Rachel broke the silence. "What are they talking about?" "They're planning something." "Keep watching." The next clip was dated 2 weeks later. Daniel spread papers across the kitchen table. Mortgage forms. The same ones now sitting in front of me. His mother picked up a pen. "It doesn't have to be perfect." Daniel shook his head. "It has to look like Emma." Then his mother slowly signed my name. I stopped breathing. Rachel whispered, "My God." Daniel looked at the signature. No. He crumpled the page. Again. The third attempt looked closer. The fourth looked almost identical to mine. I leaned back sick to my stomach. They hadn't forged my signature once. They'd practiced until they got it right. The next video was even worse. Lily walked into the kitchen carrying a coloring book. Daniel's mother immediately slid the paperwork underneath a newspaper. Lily asked, "Can I color here?" "No." "Why?" "Because grown-ups are talking." Lily quietly walked away. I paused the video. Rachel finally spoke. "Emma." "I know." "No." Her voice grew quieter. "I don't think you do." "What do you mean?" "Go back." "To what?" The moment Lily walked in, I rewound the recording. Rachel said, "Zoom in on the table." I enlarged the image. There, half hidden beneath the newspaper, was the exact manila envelope now sitting in front of me. Rachel exhaled. She didn't accidentally drop it. I stared at the screen. No, she hid it. We both understood at exactly the same moment. Daniel's mother hadn't lost the envelope. She'd hidden it where only one person would eventually find it. The little girl everyone believed wasn't paying attention. And without realizing it, Lily had carried the truth straight into my hands. I shut my laptop and just sat there. The kitchen clock ticked louder than usual. For the first time since I'd come home, I wasn't thinking about confronting Daniel. I wasn't imagining what I'd say when he walked through the front door. I was thinking about Lily. She was still asleep upstairs. 6 years old. She'd spent days believing she wasn't wanted, and somehow she was still kind enough to hand me the one thing that could protect us. I walked upstairs and stood in her doorway. She was curled up under her favorite quilt, one hand wrapped around her stuffed bear. The bruise on her left arm had already started turning yellow around the edges. Children heal quickly, sometimes too quickly. People see fading bruises and assume everything is fine. They never see the ones that stay inside. After breakfast, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to the Clarksville Police Department. The second was to Child Protective Services, returning the investigator's message from the day before. By noon, Detective Mark Alvarez was sitting at my dining room table. He looked to be in his late 50s, the kind of man who had learned that listening usually uncovered more than talking. He didn't interrupt while I laid everything out. The note, the mortgage papers, Mrs. Jenkins's photographs, the flash drive, the videos. When he finished watching the clip of Daniel practicing my signature, he removed his reading glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Mrs. Brooks, Emma is fine. He nodded. Emma, this investigation just became much bigger than suspected child abuse. I figured. This is potential forgery mortgage fraud, and depending on how the funds moved, there could be federal issues. I looked toward the staircase. My priority is my daughter. I believe you. He slid a business card across the table. If Daniel contacts you, don't argue. I won't. If he comes to the house, call us before you open the door. I gave him a tired smile. I've had enough Army training to know not to walk into an ambush. That earned the first small smile I'd seen from him. Good. That afternoon, Karen Lewis, the CPS investigator, arrived. Unlike Detective Alvarez, she spent most of her time talking to Lily instead of me. They sat on the living room floor building a puzzle. At one point, Karen asked gently, "Can you tell me where you slept while Mommy was gone?" Lily quietly pointed toward the garage. Karen didn't react. She simply placed another puzzle piece. "What happened when you wanted to come inside?" Lily hesitated. Then she whispered, "Daddy said Grandma made the rules." I looked away. Every instinct in me wanted to interrupt, to rescue her from having to say those words. But Karen caught my eye and gave the smallest shake of her head. Let her talk. So I did. Later that evening, after both investigators had left, I made grilled cheese sandwiches for dinner. Nothing fancy, just something warm. Lily dipped hers into tomato soup and smiled. "You make it better than Daddy." "That's because I use too much butter." She giggled. "I like too much butter." For the first time in days, she sounded like herself. That tiny laugh reminded me why I couldn't let anger make my decisions. Justice wasn't about making Daniel miserable. It was about making sure Lily never questioned whether she belonged again. Around 8 o'clock, my phone buzzed. Daniel had posted a new photo on Facebook. He stood in front of a ski lift in Aspen wearing mirrored sunglasses. His mother smiled beside him. The caption read, "Family time. Grateful for the people who matter most. Happy Thanksgiving." Hundreds of likes. Dozens of comments. "Beautiful family. You all deserve this vacation. Hope everyone made it." I stared at the screen. Then I noticed something. In the background, reflected in Daniel's sunglasses, was a woman I didn't recognize. Young. Blonde. Standing close enough to touch his shoulder. I zoomed in. It wasn't clear enough to identify her. But it was clear enough to know one thing. Daniel hadn't just abandoned his daughter. He'd stopped trying to hide who he really was. I quietly took a screenshot and saved it with the rest of the evidence. Because experience had taught me something. People who believe they've already won usually become careless. And careless people leave trails. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and clear. The kind of Kentucky morning where the frost stays on the grass until nearly 10. Lily was helping me make cinnamon rolls from one of those refrigerated cans she'd always thought were magic. Every time one popped open, she'd jump and laugh. For a little while, the house felt normal again. Then my phone rang. "Daniel." I looked at the screen for a moment before answering. "Hello." His voice sounded relaxed, almost cheerful. "So, are you done being angry?" I closed the oven door. "You left our 6-year-old sleeping in the garage." He sighed dramatically. "Emma, don't start." "Don't start." It wasn't a garage. I blinked. "What?" She had blankets. For a second, I honestly couldn't believe that was his defense. "Daniel." Mom thought she'd learn responsibility. "She's 6. He laughed. "You always baby her." I heard people talking in the background. Music. Someone shouted, "Happy Thanksgiving." Daniel lowered his voice. "Look, we're having breakfast. Can we not ruin today?" I almost answered. Instead, I remembered Detective Alvarez's advice. Don't argue. Let him talk. So I stayed quiet. Silence makes people uncomfortable. Uncomfortable people often fill it with the truth. Daniel finally spoke again. You know, if you'd stayed home instead of chasing your army career, none of this would have happened. There it was. The line he'd probably been rehearsing. My career. You were never around. I've spent years supporting this family. You chose the army over us. I looked toward the living room where Lily was carefully setting paper napkins on the coffee table. No, I wasn't going to let him rewrite history. I'll tell you what I chose. What? I chose to keep a roof over our heads. He scoffed. My construction business paid the bills. I almost laughed. The mortgage records on my dining room table said otherwise. Most of our payments had come directly from my military salary. Rachel had already highlighted every deposit. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I asked one simple question. Daniel, why wasn't Lily in Aspen? He didn't answer immediately. Then he said something I don't think he ever imagined another person would hear. My mother was right. About what? She would have just slowed everyone down. The line went completely silent. Not because he hung up, because neither of us spoke. Finally, he cleared his throat. Anyway, we'll be home Saturday. I think that's best. Good. And Daniel... What? Drive safely. He chuckled. I always do. Then he disconnected. I slowly lowered the phone. Detective Alvarez had asked me to keep every conversation. The recording app on my phone was still running. I saved the file under one simple name. Thanksgiving call. An hour later, Rachel arrived carrying 2 coffee cups and a thick accordion folder. I figured you could use backup. You figured right. She stepped inside, looked around the house, then smiled when she saw Lily coloring at the dining room table. Hi, Miss Lily. Hi, Colonel Rachel. Rachel laughed. I keep telling you to call me Rachel. But Mommy says you worked really hard for Colonel. I guess your mom has a point. Lily returned to her coloring book. Rachel lowered her voice. She seems calmer. A little. Good. Then I handed her my phone. Listen to the last 3 minutes. Rachel stood by the window with earbuds in. As she listened, I watched her expression change. When she finished, she looked at me. He admitted she was intentionally left behind. He did. And he blamed your military service again. I nodded. Rachel slipped the phone into the evidence folder. He keeps making this easier. I leaned against the kitchen counter. It doesn't feel easy. No. She rested a hand on my shoulder. It never does when it's your own family. I looked down at the cinnamon rolls cooling on the rack. I keep wondering if I missed something. What do you mean? The warning signs. Rachel didn't answer right away. Instead, she poured us both fresh coffee. Finally, she said quietly, Emma, decent people don't spend their lives expecting the people they love to betray them. I let those words settle. Maybe that was the hardest part. Not accepting what Daniel had done. Accepting that I'd loved someone capable of doing it? Just then another message appeared on my phone. It wasn't from Daniel. It was from Detective Alvarez. Don't leave the house tomorrow morning. We have a development. I read it twice. Whatever had happened, it had happened faster than any of us expected. Friday morning began with a knock on the front door. When I opened it, Detective Mark Alvarez was standing there with a paper coffee cup in one hand and a manila folder in the other. I hope I'm not too early. You've already had a better morning than I have, I said. He smiled politely. I've got news. I stepped aside. Come in. Lily was still upstairs watching cartoons. Rachel sat at the kitchen table reviewing copies of the mortgage paperwork. Mark set his folder down. We've confirmed the signatures aren't yours. Rachel looked up. Already. The bank's fraud department compared them to military payroll records and DMV records. I folded my arms. So that's official. It is. He opened the folder. But that's not the interesting part. He slid several printed pages toward us. Yesterday afternoon, your husband attempted to complete the refinance electronically from Colorado. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Seriously? He didn't know the account had already been flagged. I almost laughed. So he signed into a monitored account. Mark nodded. Every click, every document, every IP address, recorded. Rachel leaned back in her chair. That's unbelievably careless. Mark shrugged. People who think they're smarter than everyone else usually make our jobs easier. I thought about Daniel posing for pictures in Aspen while investigators quietly gathered evidence. For the first time all week, I felt something that wasn't anger. Confidence. Before Mark left, he handed me another envelope. This came from the bank. Inside was a formal notification freezing the refinance until the investigation was complete. Daniel wouldn't be getting a penny. Neither would his mother. As Mark reached the front door, he stopped. "Oh, yeah, one more thing." "What?" "Your mother-in-law is speaking tomorrow." I frowned. "Speaking where?" "The Montgomery County Military Families Thanksgiving Charity Luncheon." Rachel looked at me. "I know that event." So did I. Every year, local businesses raised money for veterans, military widows, and children whose parents were deployed. Daniel's mother, Patricia Brooks, had volunteered there for years. She loved being photographed handing out oversized checks. Mark continued. "She's receiving a community service award." I couldn't help shaking my head. "Of course she is. Apparently, she'll be talking about supporting military families." The irony was almost too much. After Mark left, Rachel poured herself another cup of coffee. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking Patricia enjoys an audience." Rachel smiled slightly. "She certainly does." "I'm also thinking—" I hesitated. "People should hear the truth." Rachel watched me carefully. "You want to go?" "I do." To confront her, I looked down at the folder of evidence. "No." That surprised even me. "I don't need to yell." "What do you need?" "I need people to stop believing the story she's been telling." Rachel nodded slowly. "That's a very different thing." Saturday arrived bright and cold. The luncheon was being held at the Wilma Rudolph Event Center, decorated with fall wreaths and small American flags on every table. I hadn't planned to dress in uniform. Then I changed my mind. Not because uniforms impress people. Because I'd earned the right to wear mine. Lily stayed with Mrs. Jenkins. Rachel insisted on coming with me. As we walked inside, conversation slowed. A few people recognized me. Several looked confused. One woman quietly whispered, "I thought she was still deployed." Apparently Patricia had been busy. At the front of the ballroom stood a large banner, honoring those who strengthen military families. Patricia was already at the podium smiling as photographers took pictures. "And that's why family always comes first," she was saying. Rachel glanced sideways at me. "You okay?" I took a slow breath. "I am now." The event coordinator stepped toward Patricia with an award plaque. Just before she could present it, another voice echoed across the ballroom. "Excuse me." Everyone turned. Detective Mark Alvarez had just walked through the entrance. He wasn't alone. 2 investigators from the bank's fraud division walked in behind him carrying thick evidence boxes. Patricia's smile disappeared. And for the first time since I'd come home, I watched someone else realize the story was about to change. The ballroom went so quiet I could hear the heating vents humming overhead. Patricia Brooks stood at the podium with a frozen smile, one hand still resting on the Community Service Award she hadn't officially received yet. Detective Mark Alvarez wasn't in uniform. He wore a dark sport coat over a button-down shirt, looking more like a banker than a detective. The 2 people beside him carried plain cardboard evidence boxes. No flashing lights, no dramatic entrance. Just 3 people walking calmly into a room where nobody expected them. The event coordinator looked confused. "Can I help you?" Mark nodded politely. "Yes, ma'am, I'm looking for Patricia Brooks." Patricia recovered quickly. "That would be me." She laughed lightly as if this were some kind of misunderstanding. "If this is about a donation, we'd be happy to speak afterward." Mark didn't smile. "It isn't about a donation." The room fell silent again. Rachel stood beside me without saying a word. She knew as well as I did that this wasn't the time to interrupt. It was the time to let people reveal themselves. Patricia straightened her shoulders. "Is there some sort of problem?" "There are several." Mark opened a folder. "We've been investigating a report involving mortgage fraud, forged financial documents, and child abuse." Several people gasped. Patricia looked toward me. Then she actually laughed. "This is because of her, isn't it?" She pointed directly at me. "My daughter-in-law has always been emotional." I almost answered. Instead, I remembered every conversation Rachel and Detective Alvarez had drilled into me all week. "Let the evidence speak," Mark calmly continued. "We'd appreciate a few minutes of your time." Patricia folded her arms. "I've done nothing wrong." One of the bank investigators stepped forward. "Mrs. Brooks?" He held up a copy of the refinance paperwork. "Do you recognize these documents?" "They're family business. They contain forged signatures." "No, they don't." The investigator looked at Mark. Mark nodded once. The investigator removed a tablet from the evidence box. "I think everyone deserves to see why we disagree." He connected it to the ballroom's projector. The large screen behind the podium flickered to life. Patricia's confident expression disappeared. The first video began playing. There she was, standing in my kitchen, holding a pen, Daniel beside her, clear as day. The room was so quiet that the scratching sound of the pen across paper seemed unbelievably loud. On the screen, Daniel said, "No," again. Patricia practiced my signature, once, twice, 3 times, 4, until Daniel finally nodded. "That's close enough," someone near the back whispered. "Oh my God." Nobody looked away. The second recording started automatically. This time Lily walked into the kitchen. She couldn't have been more than 6 feet from them. She asked quietly, "Can I color here?" Patricia answered without even looking at her. "No." "Why?" "Because grown-ups are talking." Lily turned and walked away. Then Patricia looked at Daniel. "We have to make sure the child gets nothing." I felt Rachel's hand lightly touch my elbow, not to comfort me, to remind me to stay where I was. Patricia suddenly shouted, "Turn that off." Nobody moved. She looked around desperately. "Those videos are edited," the bank investigator calmly replied. "They were recovered directly from the original storage device." "No." "They also contain embedded timestamps." Patricia's face flushed deep red. She pointed at me again. "She set us up." That was the moment I finally spoke. "No." Every head turned. I took one slow step forward. "You set yourselves up." I held up the wrinkled manila envelope. "My daughter found the evidence." Patricia stared at it. Recognition washed across her face. She whispered before she could stop herself. "I knew I should have burned it." The words echoed through the ballroom. She covered her mouth. Too late. Mark quietly closed his folder. "Thank you." Patricia blinked. "For what?" "For confirming the evidence." Across the room, several people who had been applauding her only minutes earlier slowly lowered their hands. One elderly veteran sitting near the front shook his head.